Ready? Ready? Start. Sir, the whistleblowers bill is another major step in this direction. It will enable people to bring to the notice of the public wrongdoings being committed by the public servants. The Judicial Standards and Accountability Bill, which has been introduced in Parliament, is a major step to make the functioning of the judiciary more accountable and more transparent. As the Honorable President has specifically mentioned women in her address, I would like to draw attention towards the gender budget statement, which does not actually give specific data about women. In the gender budget statements of previous years, less allocations of funds were made for women specific programs. That is extremely unfair. I hope that this year in the gender budget, every ministry would increase their allocations for women. More allocation of funds should be made to the states to build infrastructure to implement the Prevention of Domestic Violence Act. Similarly, funds should be allocated to constitute a high-level committee to conduct a review of self-help groups, their policies and programs. A national task force should be set up for relief and rehabilitation of women in road hit or terrorism hit areas. The issue is misuse of discretionary powers by those in authority, and the worrying thing is that the president of a national opposition party says that it may be morally wrong, but it is not legally wrong. And this attitude shows their double standard. Today, India stands at the crossroads of nation building because of our demographic dividend, economic opportunities, global trade currents, opportunities thrown up by decline of economies in the West. And in the next 15-20 years, we can hope that India can become a fully developed major superpower. If we lose this chance, history will not forgive us and future generations will criticize us for our failures. Sir, I am deeply disappointed with the address prepared by this government and delivered by the President. I have serious doubts about the priority as also the integrity of this government. There seems to be a trust deficit between the party in power and the government in power. Why was the head of the government remained silent for 3 years when this was happening right under his nose? All you have to do is to distance yourself from the appointment of the gentleman as the minister. You distance yourself from the policy formulation. You distance yourself from the implementation of that policy and all the unfortunate things that took place along with it, and then ultimately say that he was not such a big culprit. This was a complete abandonment of not only the principle of collective leadership, it was also an abandonment of collective responsibility. It was an abandonment of leadership itself, where the Prime Minister tries to distance himself from the rot that has sat in the government itself. He is leading one of the most dishonest governments in the history. Food inflation is skyrocketing, inflation is skyrocketing, and all we have is just some subtle statements from the government that by another 6 months or another 5 years, the inflation figures will moderate themselves. Your inflation figures for the last 3 years, I am talking of the wholesale price index hovers around the double figures. At times, it marginally comes down. The consumer price index is even higher. Your food price index is as high as 17 to 18% at times. Post liberalization India has success stories. The areas like telecom and highways have great success. But we find that we have outsourced it in those hands where integrity quotient was lacking. These are two sectors which have precisely got discredited the most, notwithstanding their success. The inflation affects the common man, you can't control it, and you are speaking of this great India story. Year after year, we told the rest of the world that come and invest in India. Investment, if we make India into an attractive destination, has its own advantages. It will generate economic activity and jobs. You will have more money for infrastructure creation. But if India ceases to be an attractive destination, in that event, your ability to attract the world would fail. You should seriously introspect on it. For expanding our international trade, you need wide quality ports. Our infrastructure creation is not at the pace at which it ought to be. Our inflation is disproportionately high. We all welcome social sector spending. Our corruption index is very high. All of us would be of one view in protecting our environment. Every time when the inflation is high, we keep hiking our interest rates as the only possible solution to such an extent that doing business in India will become non-competitive if we don't moderate them. Common word part 2D, exercise number 9, at the speed of 100. Exercise number 9. Ready? Ready? Start. Sir, all the opposition ruled states have to suffer from partisan attitude of the center. Your attitude is not to participate in any development activity because you have a political problem with the state. If people don't invest dollars, then others would not invest rupees also. Investors always have an option. If you want to implement the programs of this government or to generate economic activity, then you have to create an environment for it. The environment can't be partisan. Corruption is something which adds to the cost and is a great disincentive to investment. People will start losing confidence. Everywhere, the Facebook or the Twitter have become the most important instruments of opinion making. The telecom portfolio is reserved only for one political party. Then corporate, middle persons, lobbyists all map plan their strategies accordingly. You give it to some people on a first come first serve policy at a fraction of the market cost. The Prime Minister questioned the telecom minister, but he did not listen to the question. Subsidies should be merit based. There is an environment of festivity when sports events are held. Never have the games been held under a shadow of so much pessimism and cynicism. The kind of people in whose hands the games were entrusted to created an entirely negative environment around the organization of the games. Even for months after the games are over, we are still at odds as to what do we do with these infrastructure which are created. There are several areas of corruption. For the last 1 year, the CBI has been investigating into those matters. The CBI is not even allowed to interrogate that officer for months together because the moment these people are interrogated, you reach its logical conclusion. The statement which the Prime Minister made entirely dealt with what happened after 2010 when a proposal was made to annul the contract. The correct issue is how this contract was awarded in the first instance. Our space organization has been one of the most respectable organizations in this country. What was happening when this entire contract was awarded? This department is directly under the Prime Minister's office. We have a spectrum of a very high quality. 90% of this satellite capacity, transponders, and spectrum 2G equivalent is to be used by a private party. Who is this private party? I would urge the Prime Minister not to close the issue with merely saying that we have decided to annul the deal. If 2G licenses are today cancelled, the criminality won't be wiped out. The cabinet has approved this agreement in December 2025. These things have to come out in public domain and adequate answer has to be given. The lack of proactive government in detecting black money and assets held by Indians abroad has been a disturbing issue. The people who hold money outside, whether it is crime money or money from tax evasion, they have to be prosecuted. The president address refers to the money where some assessments have been made. This has nothing to do with monies lying in Swiss banks. The issue of Jammu and Kashmir has been a matter of very serious concern which impinges on India's sovereignty. If you look at the last 64 years of history, the entire effort has been to weaken the political and constitutional relationship between the state and the rest of the country. Please introspect and see whether it is towards fuller integration or towards separation. The reports of two working groups are overlapped. That would not resolve the issues. If jobs are created and people can be helped, it will be always welcome. Our suggestion to government is that to go ahead if the steps which help the people of the state remove intergenerational imbalances in the state, but please do not take any step which goes in the direction of weakening this political and constitutional relationship. The most problem is a battle where India needs to be together. We need a proactive central government as far as this issue is concerned. The approach of the government that law and order is the state subject is not going to overcome this battle. Sir, our party strongly supports the demand of Telangana state and we would urge the government to immediately complete the consultation process and move it that direction. There is one area of deep concern to us as to what is the state of the various institutions government has been misusing the CBI. We have cautioned the government not to make partisan appointments to the institutions like Election Commission or CVC. Exercise number 10 at the speed of 90. Ready? Ready? Start. Now I come to the economy. After the economy, I will make only one point about the most serious. I will not say omission, but that is something which I would plead, and I am sure the Prime Minister, with great concern on these matters, will take that into account about the management of the economy and so on. Sir, you have given me an opportunity to speak after each budget, and the fact of the matter is that because of the financial mismanagement of the last 5 years, in particular of the last 2.5 years, our deficit has reached such a stage that the Prime Minister's Economic Advisory Council itself had to say that now there is little scope for further fiscal stimulus packages. The second thing is that we remained in denial too much of last year, and when we started the remedial measures, by now most of the monetary policy instruments which could be used have already been used to the maximum extent. So we don't have possibilities there. Therefore, my request is that the government should act in time to control the situation. Thirdly, the main stimulus that you can give today is in the more rapid execution of projects. This is the problem. This is one of the great differences between India and China. If you see, they give 5 remedies on execution. First, a delivery monitoring unit in the Prime Minister's office to monitor flagship programs and iconic projects and report on their status publicly. Actually, I do not know what this new office will do. There has actually been a committee under the Prime Minister himself to expedite and monitor all major infrastructure projects. They say suitably institutionalized quarterly reporting of flagship programs. These are all on pages 12 and 13. Sir, we have so many reports. There is a quarterly report from the Administrative Reforms Department which lists the cost and time overruns on every single central project, but no consequences followed. The next is some strengthening public accountability of flagship programs by creation of an independent evaluation office at an arm's distance from the government, catalyzed by the Planning Commission. I do not understand what this arm's distance from the government, catalyzed by the rubber-stamped and habitual legitimizer of the government, that is, the Planning Commission, means third, establishing mechanisms for performance monitoring and performance evaluation in government on a regular basis. I do not know what this sentence means. Does it mean that mechanisms will be established on a regular basis or that monitoring will be on a regular basis? Thus far, the records of all the governments have been to establish mechanisms on a regular basis. Then they say 5 annual reports to be presented by the government. If you see what he said and did in the budget, in every single thing, he has made provisions for better monitoring, more reports, and so on. Sir, let me come to the management of economy. The honorable members may well recall that they have been witnessing 3 stimulus packages from the government in the past 6 months or so. But what has been its impact on the Indian economy? I would have been happy even if the effect had been minimal or worse still negative. But what I understand from my economist friends is that the government's diagnosis of the entire crisis had been completely awry. Naturally, the prescription has been out of date with the requirement of the day. The age-old prescription for any downturn in growth has been to ensure that the government of the day steps in and increases the spending. This has been referred to in the President's address too as proposed counterproductive efforts to deal with the extant situation. I have two reservations on this. Firstly, any substantial increase in the expenditure of the government at this point in time is sure to increase the fiscal deficit. Effectively, this borrowing program of the government crowds out the private initiative and hence runs counter to the private initiatives of the citizens of this country and not counterproductive to that of the recession faced by the country. In effect, we would be left with only a growing debt for the next generation, not prosperity for them. Secondly, elementary mathematics teaches us that anything multiplied by 0 is 0. This type of policies are acceptable when the government's expenditure reaches the intended target, not otherwise. When the people in the government confess that not more than 5% of the expenditure reach the people of this country and look around helplessly, I am not sure as to what he government means by such vague intentions, or in the absence of any clear-cut program, is vagueness a deliberate strategy? Sir, on poverty, we have seen all kinds of varied numbers. The Planning Commission's last estimate on poverty suggested that poverty numbers in India have tended to come down to just 260 million people last year. एक्सरसाइज नंबर 11 80 की स्पीड पे है. डन.